My name is Matthew Harris. All my life, I watched my father raise a glass to my brother while I sat in the shadows, invisible. In front of hundreds of people, he promised Nathan $75 million, a Tesla, and a mansion, while he didn't even look my way. That was the moment the last piece of me shattered. I thought I would carry that silence forever, until a stranger placed an envelope in my hand and whispered words that would change everything. The ballroom smelled of money and salt air, a mixture of polished oak and the ocean breeze that drifted in through tall glass doors. Chandeliers spilled light across the marble floors, making every surface gleam as if the night itself had been polished for display. Guests moved with the smooth confidence of people accustomed to wealth, politicians with practiced smiles, real estate moguls shaking hands, reporters scribbling notes for tomorrow's headlines. Parked at the front entrance, gleaming beneath the valet lights, was a brand new Tesla. Its presence wasn't subtle. It was staged like a crown jewel, a trophy for a man who hadn't yet lifted a finger to earn it. I walked past in a suit that didn't quite fit, the fabric tugging at my shoulders, the faint smell of mothballs clinging to the sleeves. Nathan had worn it years earlier, when he was thinner. It still carried his scent, his shape, his shadow. Inside, my father gripped the microphone with the ease of a man born to command attention. His voice boomed across the hall. Tonight, we celebrate Nathan Harris, the future of our family, the rightful heir to everything we've built. He will inherit the company, the oceanfront mansion, and $75 million to carry us forward. Applause erupted like thunder, glasses lifted high. Nathan stood near the stage, his grin carved sharp, his posture dripping with entitlement. I felt the ripple of whispers behind me, words that sliced sharper than any blade. That must be the other one. He doesn't even look like a Harris. I tightened my grip around the stem of my glass, the cold seeping into my palm. My chest hollowed as I stared through the haze of golden light, realizing the cruel truth. In this family, I was nothing more than a shadow. The roar of applause around Nathan hit me like a wave, yet all I could hear was the echo of my own silence. As the clinking of glasses filled the ballroom, my mind slipped back into the dim corridors of my childhood. At 15, while Nathan packed for an Ivy League summer program, I was forced to haul lumber and pour concrete at my father's construction sites. Sweat stung my eyes under the Florida sun, but no one cared enough to notice. At the dinner table, I was placed at the very end, as if distance itself could erase me. Every time I tried to speak, the conversation leapt over me, leaving my words suspended in the air, unheard. Richard's voice still rings in my ears from those nights. Nathan is the true Harris. You, Matthew, are just living off the scraps. The words landed heavier than the bricks I carried by day. My mother rarely intervened. Sometimes she would glance at me, then sigh, and whisper what cut deeper than my father's ridicule. Why can't you be more like Nathan? But there was one voice that rose above the cruelty, one light that broke through the darkness. My grandmother Evelyn. She never cared for grades or trophies. She sat me down and asked about the things that stirred my heart, what I wanted for myself, what dreams I held tight when no one else was listening. She'd clasp my hand, her touch warm and steady, and tell me, Matthew, truth will find its way to you. Don't mistake their blindness for reality. Those words had once seemed like a fragile comfort, something I tucked away and forgot. But as the ballroom erupted for Nathan, her voice returned to me, sharp and clear. A shiver ran through me. Maybe she had known something I was only now beginning to understand. I was ready to slip out the back, away from the noise, when I noticed him, tall, sharp in a black suit, eyes cutting through the crowd until they locked on me. He walked with intent, ignoring the laughter and music, until he stood right before me. Without ceremony, he pressed a thick white envelope into my hand and leaned close. His whisper was precise, deliberate. It's time. Matthew. Before I could respond, he vanished into the sea of tuxedos and gowns, leaving me with the weight of the envelope burning against my palm. My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside were official documents, stamped and signed, and folded neatly among them, a handwritten letter. The script was unmistakable, Evelyn's. My breath caught as I read, "Matthew, if you are holding this, it means you are ready. You are the true heir to my legacy. I did not choose Nathan, because brilliance without character destroys everything it touches. I chose you for your patience, for your humility, for the strength forged in silence." The words blurred as my eyes stung, my knees weakened, my pulse thundered in my ears. The company, the mansion, the wealth, everything my father had just promised to Nathan was mine, not in theory, not in fantasy, in truth. The orchestra played softly, strings sweeping through the air as I lifted my gaze. At the front of the room, Richard and Nathan raised their glasses high, smiles carved like monuments. I clutched the envelope against my chest, the world spinning around me, a single thought searing into my mind. This moment could change everything. The music swelled softly around the chandeliers, a polite, elegant soundtrack to my father's booming praise of Nathan, words about legacy, brilliance, and the future of the Harris name rolled from his tongue as if rehearsed 100 times. My fingers tightened around the envelope until the paper creaked, heart hammering against my ribs. I rose from my chair. The sudden scrape of it against the floor made heads turn, and a hush rippled outward as I began to walk toward the stage. "I have something to announce," I said, my voice louder than I'd planned, echoing under the high ceiling. Richard's smile froze, his eyes narrowing as he leaned toward the microphone. "Sit down, Matthew. This isn't your moment." The room's golden glow pressed against my skin like a heat lamp. But I drew the letter out anyway, the tremor in my hand betraying the steel in my spine. Grandmother Evelyn's legacy. It isn't meant for Nathan. A gasp ran through the crowd. Guests whispered behind jeweled hands. Nathan's laugh cut through the noise, sharp and mocking. "What's this? Another stunt? Looking for pity?" My father's jaw clenched, the microphone catching the grind of his teeth. "Stop embarrassing me. Sit down now." I tore the envelope open fully and raised the documents high. The seal and Evelyn's signature glimmered under the ballroom lights. Some guests leaned forward, curious. Others stiffened. Richard's voice cracked like a whip. "Forged papers. My son Nathan is the rightful heir." The weight of 100 eyes bore down on me, suspicion and judgment pinning me in place like a moth beneath glass. The buzz of conversation swelled, laughter curling at the edges. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, as if I were standing on a ship about to sink. Nathan lounged at the front, smirk slicing across his face. "Sit down before you make an even bigger fool of yourself," he called, amusement dripping from every word. My hands shook, the urge to retreat clawing at my chest. Just as I swallowed back the taste of defeat, a voice rose clear and steady from the back. "I can verify those documents." The room shifted, startled. An older man with silver hair and a measured stride stepped forward, his eyes fixed on me, the attorney who had once handled Evelyn's affairs. Gasps rippled through the hall. Guests craned their necks, reassessing. Richard's face flushed crimson as he stormed off the stage, stabbing a finger at the attorney. "Shut your mouth or I'll ruin you. This is defamation." Linda appeared at my elbow, her perfume sharp, her whisper sharper. "You're tearing this family apart, Matthew. Stop before it's too late." For a moment, I thought the tide had turned in my favor, but Richard's threat landed like a hammer. Nathan leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "You just signed your own death warrant." I straightened, sweat dampening my collar, the papers still in my grip. The murmurs and stares blurred together, but one truth crystallized inside me. If I back down now, I stay buried forever. I locked eyes with Nathan, my grip tightening. Not this time. The attorney's confirmation should have felt like the first rung of a ladder out, but instead, the room seemed to collapse inward. Richard grabbed the microphone with a force that made the candles shiver. "Nathan is the rightful heir," he barked, voice sharpened into accusation. "Matthew is fabricating a scene to tear this family apart." My mother's approach was quieter, colder, up close. Linda's eyes had gone flat, like a portrait gone lifeless. She didn't ask for proof. She offered a verdict. "You'll ruin everything we built," she said, and the words landed with the intimacy of a betrayal. I had spent years hoping for a single soft defense from her. Anything, but that hope died in her whisper. Nathan pulled me into the shadowed corridor beyond the ballroom, the noise muffled into a distant hum. He pressed so close our foreheads nearly touched. His breath smelled of expensive bourbon. "Think you've got a chance?" he hissed. "I'll crush you, publicly and quietly. You won't survive this." The threat was a familiar animal, the same arrogance that had built his world. Alone in that narrow hallway, reality condensed to two options: retreat and disappear, or stand and see this through. My hands still carried the documents, my knuckles were white. For the first time, solitude felt like armor rather than weakness. I squared my shoulders and walked back into the light. The crowd's murmur tightened as I climbed the steps to the stage again. Richard kept talking, trying to stitch doubt back into the room, while Nathan sat smug at the front, a statue carved of entitlement. I didn't speak. I unlocked a small USB and slid it into the laptop by the podium. The screen blinked, then filled the ballroom with the low, steady voice of my grandmother. On the screen, Evelyn sat in her library, the camera close enough to catch the tremor in her hand as she read aloud, "I, Evelyn Harris, founder of Harris Realty, name my grandson Matthew Harris the sole successor." She signed, the legal stamp visible for everyone. Her eyes met the camera with an unyielding clarity I'd only ever seen when she believed in something fiercely. The room exhaled in waves, shock, denial. Then a rustle of movement as people stood and craned to see. Richard lunged, face red, reaching for the papers, but a hotel staffer in security stepped between us. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. She staggered back as color drained from her face. Nathan's glass trembled in his hand. His smile had crumbled into something near panic. For the first time, the balance shifted. I held the microphone, felt the silence press in like a held breath, and said simply, without flourish, "This is not a stunt. This is the truth, and I won't let it be buried." The ballroom froze in the aftermath of Evelyn's voice, her declaration echoing in every corner. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard ripped the microphone from its stand, his face blazing red. His roar shattered the silence. "This boy is nothing but a leech. He doesn't even deserve a seat at this table, let alone control of my company." Something shifted inside me. Years of silence, years of swallowing humiliation, cracked open. I lifted my chin and met his glare without flinching. My voice was steady, almost foreign to my own ears. "No, it's you who betrayed her legacy. I haven't stolen a thing. I'm taking back what was meant to be mine." Nathan shot up from his chair, the smugness stripped from his face, desperation replacing it. "You've got nothing but papers. Who here is going to believe you?" His laugh was sharp, but the edge faltered as a few guests began clapping, hesitant at first, then stronger. The sound multiplied, pushing through the tension like sparks catching flame. The room splintered into factions, those who clung to Richard's power and those whose loyalties shifted toward the undeniable evidence on the screen. Every whisper, every shout blended into a current of judgment, as if I were standing trial before an impromptu jury of Florida's elite. Richard's eyes burned with fury, veins standing out at his temples. But I didn't look away. The weight of years pressed behind me, yet for the first time, I wasn't bending under it. I drew in a long breath, letting the silence sharpen around my words, and said clearly enough for every ear to hear, "You can lie for a lifetime, but tonight the truth has already won." The ballroom had dissolved into chaos, shouts clashing with gasps, hands gesturing wildly, alliances shifting in the span of heartbeats. Then the heavy double doors creaked open, and silence fell like a curtain. Every head turned as an old, steady rhythm echoed across the marble floor, the measured tap of a cane. Evelyn entered slowly, seated in her wheelchair, silver hair crowned by the glow of the chandeliers. Her presence was like gravity itself, pulling the room back into order. Each strike of her cane against the wood seemed to command attention more powerfully than Richard's bellowing ever could. The whispers hushed. Even Richard froze, his fury suspended mid-breath. She was rolled toward the stage, her frame fragile with age, but her eyes, sharp, piercing, carried the weight of decades. The air tightened as she looked first at me, then turned to face Richard and Nathan with a calm that sliced sharper than anger. Her voice, though softened by years, rang steady and unwavering. "I chose Matthew," she said, and the words struck like a gavel, "because he has humility, because he knows endurance, because he sees people for who they are and not for what they can give. Nathan, you are clever, yes, but your cleverness has curdled into arrogance. Richard, you built wealth but left compassion behind. This company does not need more arrogance. It does not need more greed. It needs a leader who understands the cost of being overlooked, and that is Matthew." A collective murmur surged through the hall. Guests leaned toward each other, their whispers thick with shock, but more than a few were nodding now, their gazes swinging from Richard to me with something new, recognition. For years I had been invisible in their eyes. In this moment, I felt their focus burn like sunlight. Richard collapsed into a chair, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles whitened. His face flushed crimson, lips pressed tight, yet no words came. Nathan staggered back a step, shaking his head. No, this can't be real," he muttered, but the conviction had drained from him, leaving only disbelief etched across his features. The glass he clutched quivered until he set it down with a trembling hand. From the corner of my vision, I saw Linda. Her face had gone pale, her expression unreadable. She lowered her gaze and, without a word, slipped through the crowd toward the exit. The click of her heels faded into the silence she left behind, and I felt the weight of her absence settle heavy in my chest. The room erupted again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was a storm of conversation, hands gesturing, guests reassessing loyalties out loud. The foundation of Richard's authority had cracked wide open, and Evelyn had lit the fuse. She reached for me then, her hand frail yet firm as it wrapped around mine. Her touch carried both strength and finality. "Matthew," she said, her gaze locking with mine, "from this moment, you carry it all. Don't be afraid." My throat tightened. Words lodged behind a rush of emotions I had buried for years. The tears came before I could stop them, sliding down my face in front of everyone. For the first time, I wasn't ashamed to be seen. For the first time in my life, I felt visible, not as the forgotten son, not as a shadow, but as the man my grandmother had always believed I could be. When the last guest drifted out and the chandeliers dimmed, I slipped through the ballroom doors and let the cool Florida night wrap around me. The wind carried the brine of the ocean, sharp and clean, brushing across my face like a baptism. In the distance, the city shimmered with restless light, while the tide rolled in, steady, whispering against the shore as if the world itself exhaled. I stood there, the envelope still pressed against my chest, and memory bled through the silence. I saw again the boy condemned to the far end of the dinner table, his words smothered before they could find air. I felt the sting of rough wood against my palms from long days at the construction sites. 15 years old, while Nathan strutted through Ivy League halls in the summer. I heard my father's ridicule, sharp as broken glass, and my mother's sighs of disappointment, tiny dismissals that weighed heavier than any hammer I carried. But tonight, the weight had shifted. The shadow I had worn for so long had fallen away, replaced by a truth too powerful to be ignored. The inheritance wasn't in the numbers my father shouted or the mansion displayed like a prize. The true legacy was this moment, the recognition that I was no longer invisible, no longer chained to their blindness. It was freedom. It was finally being seen. I lifted my eyes to the sky where the stars burned bright and constant. My voice cracked but carried in the salt air. "I see it now, Grandma, and I'll carry it further than you ever dreamed." With the surf at my feet and the city at my back, I began walking the shoreline. My stride was firm, each step carving itself into the wet sand. For the first time in my life, I walked not as a shadow, but as a man reborn.